Hello. On Sunday, we preached a message called Hope for Those Who Fear the Future out of Psalms 112, verse 7. And I guess, like the new coronavirus vaccine, they say you have to have two doses. You take one, and then a little bit later, you take the second one. So I guess for this sermon, this is the second dose of what we tried to give out on Sunday. This is your second inoculation of this truth. And so we want to remind those who weren't there what we were talking about, what the sermon in a nutshell was. And that was simply this: God knows your future. And we all would agree with that. But here's the second step that's a little harder sometimes for us to get into our spirit and into our mind and our faith. That he not only knows the future, he has prepared all that you need to get through with victory, so that you don't need to fear the future. The scripture that we read was this one, Psalms 112:7, where it says that the righteous will not fear bad news. Why? Because they confidently trust the Lord's care for them. And the example for that I wanted to share was the story that's very familiar here in Pennsylvania, from Lancaster County, from nickel mines. Most of you probably know the story. And the story has been written from various ways, but Marie Roberts was a 28-year-old mother, I think of 3 kids at the time, when she got the horrible bad news that her husband, Charlie Roberts, had entered the Amish school and had shot 10 girls. 5 of them died, and later shot himself. And so she said she began the day as a normal day in Lancaster County and ended the day by noon. She was a widow and her children had no father, and he had done this most horrible event that she could have possibly imagined. She's talking about bad news, that's about as bad as it gets. But out of that horrible tragedy, God gave grace, because God already knew it was going to happen. And he gave grace that she needed, and the others needed as they went through this time. Out of that came a movie, when God swept in with his grace, the Amish and their forgiveness. There was a movie that was written called Amish Grace, a fantastic movie about forgiveness that came out of that. And also Marie Roberts, who probably never hardly taught a class, didn't do much of that. But then out of this, she's become a nationwide speaker. She blogs. She has shared her testimony. In 2006, October the 2nd was when this event occurred, and horrible tragedy in her life. But God's grace swept in and held her up and helped her get through it. And 2007, God had prepared a man who would step in, whose name was Dan Monville. Her name is now Marie Monville. You can look her up on YouTube and hear the story of God's abundant grace. God, who knew the future, also prepared all that she needed to get through it. And so it didn't destroy her life. In fact, the tragedy has enabled her to become a nationwide speaker of the grace and forgiveness of God, and was able to do that because God knows the future, but he also prepares all that we need to get through it. So the righteous do not need to fear bad news. Why? Because they know that the Lord's care for them. They confidently trust in the Lord's care for them. That's what the scripture says. And so that's what I want to leave you with today, is we have hope to face the future. Bad news will come. Tragedy will come. Jesus said, in this world you'll have trouble. But we don't have to fear that, because with the bad news, with the trouble, will also be God's grace and God's preparation. He already knows the future, and he's preparing all that you need. As we said yesterday, Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son and went up on the mountain to sacrifice him. And on the other side of the mountain, God was bringing up a ram. And at just the right time, the ram got its horns caught in the thicket. So when Abraham needed a sacrifice, God had already prepared it. When he didn't sacrifice his son as God said not to, he saw the ram caught in the thicket. God had prepared what he needed ahead of time. And God will do the same for you. God bless you with this word.